What is an adult? I'm 18, languishing in the wilds of nowhere, Tennessee.
The film opens with Cairo Sweet, a teenager living alone in her parents' spacious home in the quiet Tennessee countryside. Her parents, prominent lawyers, are frequently away for work, leaving Cairo to take care of herself. Each morning, she confidently pulls on her favorite tall boots and a short skirt, striding through the woods on her way to school as if the world belongs to her. Mr. Jonathan Miller, her middle-aged teacher, is already waiting in class at school. He carries an air of melancholy, with his dream of becoming a famous author still unfulfilled. To Cairo, he is more than just a teacher. He is a father figure, although she harbors a small crush on him. Cairo often arrives in class before her peers. That morning, Jonathan compliments her punctuality and encourages her to start on the semester's reading list. With a knowing smirk, Cairo surprises him by revealing that she has already read all 12 books. Their conversation shifts into an animated discussion about literature, showcasing her sharp intellect. As their chat deepens, Cairo's friend Winnie Black, who is repeating the grade, shows up.
Chicken biscuit and a Coke. Excuse me, but what's that you say?
Winnie playfully pulls Cairo away to the cafeteria, leaving Jonathan alone to glance at the books on her desk. As Jonathan browses through the pile, his friend Boris Fillmore walks in. Spotting one of the books, Boris can't resist teasing Jonathan by reciting a steamy passage aloud. Jonathan, embarrassed, tries to stop him before it gets too inappropriate, but he continues joking. Then Boris notices something unexpected. A copy of one of Jonathan's published books is in Cairo's pile. Surprised and flattered, Jonathan can't help but feel proud. Later that evening, Jonathan returns home to find his wife, Beatrice, glued to her computer as usual. He attempts to start a conversation, eager to share his excitement about a student appreciating his work. However, Beatrice needs to respond more, too engrossed in her tasks. Just as he starts to gain her attention, Beatrice's co-worker Amy calls, pulling her away from their conversation. After the call, Jonathan tries again, flirting with Beatrice to lighten the mood. Jonathan and Beatrice share a couple of drinks, and their tension begins to fade. Just as things become romantic, another call from Amy interrupts them, leaving Jonathan frustrated and on edge. The next day, Jonathan vents to Boris about how Amy's interruptions ruined his weekend and the moment he hoped to share with Beatrice. As usual, Boris teases him about the situation and distracts him with trivial updates about his life. During their conversation, they notice Cairo emerging from the woods. Still tense, Jonathan can't help but glance at her as she approaches. Cairo, unaware of anything unusual, smiles politely after removing her headphones. Trying to clear his head, he starts a lighthearted conversation with Cairo.
Goodbye, you bad bye.
Well, goodbye.
Meanwhile, Winnie approaches Boris, pretending she accidentally dropped her belongings nearby. Boris instantly sees through her act, but Cairo calls Winnie out on her boldness. Unbothered, Winnie shifts the conversation and begins tossing out ideas for Cairo's essay. Cairo, however, finds these ideas uninspiring. Later in Cairo's home, Winnie makes an unexpected suggestion. Cairo could flirt with teachers to gather inspiration for her writing. Surprised, she questions the suggestion, expressing concern about the awkwardness of the age gap. Ever confident, Winnie brushes off her concerns and reassures her that it would be fine. She hints that Jonathan might notice Cairo in a way that feels different. Winnie explains that a mature, experienced partner could offer understanding and a positive experience. Initially hesitant, Cairo's curiosity is sparked by Winnie's playful encouragement. In the following days, Cairo finds herself thinking about Jonathan more often. Her curiosity grows, and she begins to long for something more profound. During class, her eyes frequently wander toward him, her thoughts drifting. One day, Jonathan discreetly approaches her and whispers, asking her to meet him in his office after the bell. When Cairo arrives, Jonathan finishes chatting with Boris and invites him for dinner. Boris accepts the situation and leaves just as Cairo steps inside. Cairo catches Jonathan in the middle of dancing, practicing some moves. Embarrassed but amused, he laughs it off and playfully shows off his own steps to her. They share a lighthearted moment before their conversation shifts to Winnie. Jonathan appreciates their friendship and gently inquires about Cairo's home life. He praises her recent writing, impressed by her ability to precisely capture phrases. Recognizing her potential, he challenges her to write a short story in the style of her favorite author. If she succeeds, he promises that she'll pass the semester. Excited, Cairo surprises him by reciting a line from one of his published works. Jonathan is delighted and admits that the book she referenced was his first publication, making her recognition of it particularly meaningful to him. Taking her enthusiasm seriously, Jonathan invites Cairo to meet over the weekend to discuss her story idea further. At the meeting spot, Jonathan sneaks up behind her, catching her off guard. They exchange smiles and chat as Jonathan comments on how much they've grown as writers during their discussions. Nearby, a poet named Elliot performs, and as Jonathan listens intently, Cairo can't help but steal glances at him. Later, they critique Elliot's poetry together, exchanging ideas and opinions. She offers him a cigarette, which he accepts. The two share an easy conversation during the moment. On a new school day, Cairo switches up her look and brings coffee for Boris and Jonathan. Her newfound confidence is evident as they joke around. She even shares a cigarette with them. Later, Cairo tells Winnie that while Jonathan didn't explicitly comment on her new appearance, she could tell he noticed it. During one of their discussions, Cairo shares her plan to write her story in the style of Henry Miller.
Okay, who is it?
Henry Miller.
A renowned author known for exploring themes of love and intimacy. Jonathan hesitates initially, concerned that this choice could stir up trouble at school. Still, Cairo insists it will make her story more compelling. And after some thought, Jonathan decides to trust her and gives her the go-ahead.
Don't do that. Don't look at me like that.
While Jonathan is reviewing her idea, his phone buzzes with a text from his wife Beatrice, inviting him on a weekend getaway. Distracted by thoughts of his wife, Jonathan hurriedly approves Cairo's concept without much deliberation as she approaches to discuss it. Later, when they're alone, Winnie teases Cairo, joking that she's trying to seduce their professor. She exaggerates Cairo's actions for comedic effect, making her laugh. One day, Cairo frantically searches for her missing phone. At the same time, Jonathan is repeatedly interrupted by calls from Amy about their delayed weekend trip. To his surprise, his phone rings, and he hears Cairo's voice. She had accidentally left her phone in his bag. As they talk, Jonathan's wife, Beatrice, grows increasingly irritated by the postponed getaway. To ease the tension, Jonathan volunteers to return Cairo's phone to her house, agreeing quickly despite the stormy weather. While driving, a heavy rainstorm begins. When Jonathan arrives, he sees Cairo outside in the pouring rain, wearing a strikingly seductive dress. Their eyes meet, and the moment becomes charged with intensity. They embrace and share a deep, passionate kiss as she approaches him. Afterwards, Jonathan finds it impossible to stop thinking about Cairo. Suddenly, she sends him her midterm story, jolting him back to reality. Preoccupied with her concerns, Beatrice brushes off Jonathan's attempts to engage her and tells him to stop distracting her. Seeking clarity, Jonathan retreats to a small house nearby and prints out Cairo's story. As he reads it, he becomes completely absorbed in her mature and provocative narrative, imagining Cairo in the scene she describes.
I'm 18, languishing in the wilds of nowhere, Tennessee. He would fill her up with cum.
Overwhelmed by emotions, he turns to Beatrice for intimacy, hoping to ground himself. The next day, Cairo arrives at class dressed provocatively, but Jonathan's demeanor toward her is noticeably colder. His usual warmth is absent, and Cairo quickly senses the shift. Concerned, Cairo asks Jonathan if something is wrong. He admits he is disappointed with her story, calling its particular themes inappropriate for a school assignment. While he acknowledges her skillful storytelling, he feels uncomfortable grading such work. He worries about the message it could send to other students. Cairo explains that her story is less extraordinary than he perceives, but Jonathan refuses to listen. He dismisses both her story and the connection they've shared, telling her he regrets trusting her. Hurt and furious, Cairo retaliates by calling his writing uninspired and average. Provoked, she dares him to fail her. Their argument escalates, with Cairo accusing Jonathan of being jealous of her creativity. Jonathan, trying to maintain professionalism, reiterates the importance of keeping boundaries in their teacher-student relationship. Feeling betrayed, Cairo storms out, leaving her story in the administrative mailbox. That evening, Jonathan discusses Cairo's story with Beatrice. The narrative explores a complex teacher-student dynamic and delves into the student's personal growth, leaving him conflicted. Meanwhile, Cairo spends the night drinking with Winnie, where they vent their frustrations. As the drinks flow, they become playful, joking about teasing Boris and taking silly photos together. Suddenly, Jonathan receives a call from the principal's office. Beatrice hands him the phone, and the principal accuses him of having an inappropriate relationship with Cairo. Stunned, Jonathan denies the allegations and tries to reassure Beatrice. However, she warns him of the severe consequences, emphasizing that his career and marriage could be jeopardized. The next day, Cairo skips class to attend a meeting with the principal. While Jonathan continues teaching, Winnie appears visibly distressed by Cairo's absence. After class, she approaches Jonathan and expresses how much Cairo means to her, urging him to consider her perspective. Feeling emotionally withdrawn, Jonathan brushes her off and is unwilling to engage. As events in Cairo's life unfold, Jonathan is summoned to a meeting with school management. He and Cairo are thoroughly questioned about their interactions in class and outside of school. Cairo's responses suggest a more profound connection, leaving Jonathan worried about his career and reputation. Her consistent implications ultimately lead the principal to suspend Jonathan. As he exits the meeting, Boris intercepts him, expressing disappointment and cautioning him to respect boundaries moving forward. Although Boris's advice is sincere, it only intensifies Jonathan's feelings of isolation. At home, Jonathan informs Beatrice about his suspension, but hesitates to reveal the whole story. Under her pressing questions, he eventually confesses to having feelings for Cairo. This revelation quickly escalates into a heated argument, culminating in Beatrice storming out and declaring her intention to file for divorce. Meanwhile, Winnie confronts Cairo, warning her that her actions could ruin Jonathan's career. Dismissive of Winnie's concerns, Cairo frames the situation as her greatest triumph and begins incorporating it into her college essay. She justifies her actions by portraying them as revenge for Jonathan's lack of respect and trust in her. In her essay, Cairo vividly describes the fallout of Jonathan's alleged misconduct, painting a dramatic picture of the chaos she has caused. As she finishes writing, she leans back, satisfied with her unleashed turmoil. Jonathan Miller, having reached rock bottom but inspired for the first time in years, decides to write a new book.